Guys, I'm back. Money, 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 money. $3, $3. You're so dumb. Lady. Okay, so today's advertisement is Addie. Addie, you are super good and you're hygienic, and in school you're like very faster to me when we go to speech. Our second shout out is the guy, can I tell something, guys? I just thought so. And I'm fearless. That's so dumb, but for some reason it got 1K, 2K views.
The streaming home of
Is that crazy?
the whole family.
Look, I made
so much more.
this many dollars off
They're
of
back
that.
and more
I
bueno
made
than ever. Taco Bueno's Kick and Fried Chicken
300,
Tacos
I
are
think,
here with 3 saucy
dollars.
flavors,
Let me see.
including the Bueno style with queso, potatoes, and jalapeno ranch coleslaw. Your choice for $2.99.
I
Only
got
at
this
Taco
many
Bueno.
dollars. Let me say it to y'all. 9,903,458.
I grew up in Florida in this little beach town right by the ocean.
We're
The
gonna
population was
read
quite small
scary
and
stories.
everyone knew everyone. This
Okay.
story took place during the early weeks of my senior year of high school. The biggest chatter that year was that we had a new student. For privacy reasons, I'll give her a fake name, Maya. We hadn't had a new student in years, and everyone was excited to get to know Maya, who had moved to Florida from California. The only problem was that Maya didn't seem at all interested in getting to know us. Maya was a strange person, putting it nicely. She wore only black clothing and had an odd necklace with a pentagram on it. She was quiet and would only speak when spoken to. There was always a hard, almost angry expression on her face. People soon gave up trying to make friends with her and mostly left her alone. I had math with Maya and I was always careful to be extra nice to her. I let her borrow a pencil if she needed one and offered to turn her work in when she was done with it. Something about her gave me the creeps, and I felt like by doing this, I at least would never be a target of hers. She seemed to appreciate these gestures. One day after school, I was laying on my bed and scrolling through TikTok, one of my favorite ways to relax. I was on my FYP mindlessly going through videos before something caught my eye. It was Maya. I didn't even remember following her, but there she was. The TikTok was incredibly strange. She was seated in a dark room with candles surrounding her. It looked like some kind of seance. I clicked on her profile and began scrolling through all of her videos, one by one. I noticed that she had barely any followers, so not many people had seen the videos. Each video was creepier than the one before. It looked like Maya really did practice some form of witchcraft. Most videos appeared to be filmed in some sort of a cave. There were strange red markings on the walls of the cave, and the sound of water could be heard in the distance. The video was clearly filmed somewhere near the ocean. I scrolled through the videos, zooming in to try to get a better look at the location of the cave. I noticed the moss growing along the floor and some white flowers growing around the opening. All of a sudden, something clicked in my head. I had been to the cave before. It was only a short distance away from the shore, and my brothers and I had played there many years ago when we were younger. I knew I could easily get into it by using my dad's fishing boat. You're probably wondering why I had any interest at all in going anywhere near Maya and her creepy cave hideout where she was doing who knows what. The feeling was similar to that of watching a scary movie. It made your stomach turn, and it was disgusting to watch, but you still wanted to know what was going to happen. I just couldn't curb my curiosity. Now, I wasn't totally crazy. I was way too much of a wuss to try going to the cave at night. I waited for a bright, sunny day. I thought the cheerful weather would somehow make my trip out to the cave slightly less creepy. My biggest fear was that Maya would be in the cave when I got there. From the looks of most of her videos, it seemed like she usually went there at night, so I figured it would be safe to go there during the early afternoon. I went to the harbor and unchained my dad's fishing boat before taking off in the direction of the cave. After a bit of circling and redirecting, I finally found the entrance. The second I saw the white flowers, I knew I had the right spot. I tied the boat up and got out. My heart beat with nervous excitement as I began to make my way into the cave, gravel crunching under my sneakers. At first, nothing really looked out of place. It didn't look like anyone had been there recently, but the cave was deep, and I knew Maya's setup was probably far from the entrance. After I had been walking for a few minutes, most of the light from the sun had diminished, and I had to turn on my flashlight. I shone it forward and saw something in the distance. I quickened my pace, and I instantly knew I had found the right place. It was like a scene you would see in some sort of horror movie. There were red markings on the wall, stacks of candles, what appeared to be the remnants of a fire, and lots of strange charms. The most overwhelming part of the strange environment was the incredible, overpowering stench. It smelled like something had been rotting for a long time. I shone my flashlight around, trying to figure out what the stench was coming from. I was instantly drawn to a large utility barrel, like the kind used at construction sites. I had a sick, awful feeling in my stomach about that barrel, but I had to know what was inside. Surely, whatever it was not living. I grabbed the lid of the barrel to remove it, but it was on tight, and I couldn't open it while still holding my flashlight. I put my flashlight on the ground and pulled the lid upwards with full force, ripping it free. The stench that came from inside was almost enough to take my breath away. I dropped the lid on the ground and scrambled to pick up my flashlight. I then shone it inside the barrel, my fingers trembling. The sight before me is by far the most disturbing thing I have ever seen, and I will never be able to lose this memory. Inside the barrel was what was left of an older woman. It looked as if she had been dead a long time, and her body was beginning to deteriorate. Her clothes were tattered, and there were red marks around her neck. I was still processing what I had seen when all of a sudden I heard a voice behind me asking me what I was doing. I spun around, only to see Maya, standing behind me, holding a knife with a long blade. Her expression was terrifying, her eyes empty and soulless. I let out a scream so awful I could barely believe that it came out of me. I took off running, dropping my flashlight in the process. I ran past Maya and in the direction of the entrance of the cave. Without my flashlight, I was left in complete darkness and could only hope that I was going the right way. I could hear footsteps behind me, and I could tell Maya was running after me at a quick pace. I had never been more scared of her in my life and wanted nothing but to put as much distance between me and her as possible.
Like this?
I was unbelievably relieved when I was finally able to see some light coming out in the distance, and I knew I was getting closer to the exit. I ran as fast as I could to that light, not stopping once to catch my breath. I stumbled frequently along the way, my knees hitting the rough ground hard, but I didn't take time to examine my injuries. I just kept getting up and running as fast as I could. When I finally reached the exit and ran into daylight, my heart dropped at yet another awful surprise. Maya had removed the anchor of my father's boat, and it was floating out in the ocean a good distance away. I didn't have time to second guess anything and jumped straight into the water, heading toward the boat. I wasn't a great swimmer, but I knew how to keep my head above water. I reached the boat, my lungs burning from the extra exertion. I started the engine and took off in the direction of the harbor at full speed. When I glanced over my shoulder, I could see Maya watching me from the entrance of the cave. I started screaming for help the second I pulled the boat into the dock, and I attracted some passerby. I told them what I had seen, and the police were called to the area. I did my best to give them directions to the cave, and they quickly took off to investigate. By the time they got there, Maya was gone, but the barrel was still there. It was taken back to shore, where it was picked up by the coroner to be examined. Less than 3 hours later, Maya was picked up by police at a local gas station and taken into custody. She was questioned about the body in the barrel, and she was surprisingly honest. Her answers were enough to shock even the toughest of people. It turned out that the body was of her mother, whom Maya had sacrificed for some sort of ritual that she read about online. Maya had somehow convinced herself that she was a real witch with some sort of mystical ability. She believed that performing the ritual, she would gain extra powers. She had drugged her mother, placed her in the barrel, and then carried her by boat to the cave, where she performed the ritual involving killing her through suffocation. The whole situation terrified the entire town, but especially me. I was traumatized and had to go to therapy to deal with the disturbing images I couldn't get out of my head. My friends and family did their best to comfort me, but it was hard dealing with the reality of what I saw. The only comfort I had was knowing that by trusting my gut and investigating the cave, I ended up uncovering Maya's secret. Now, she wouldn't be able to get away with the murder or hurt anyone else around her. I can now finally relax, knowing that Maya will never see the light of day ever again. Instead, she'll spend the rest of her days in a cage, with only the four walls around her to stare at. Even though a lot of time has passed, I don't think I'll ever be able to go into a cave again, no matter how many people came with me. What would...
Was that scary? Well, we're watching Scary Stories of McDonald's. McDonald's! No, well, good, yeah. Well, I love McDonald's too, by the way. I like McDonald's. True, McDonald's stories.
When I was in middle school, I lived with my younger sister Callie, who was 3 at the time, and my mom in a tiny apartment in a bad part of town. My mom had left my dad when we were young, and she had become the sole provider for my family ever since. One of her cousins worked at the local McDonald's, which was not far from where we lived, so that was where my mom would drop me off until she got home from work and could pick us up. I was responsible for watching Callie during this time. While it might sound like kind of an annoying job to have, I didn't mind it at all. My mom's cousin would give both of us free food, and I could work on homework while Callie played in the indoor playground. One night my mom was running late to pick us up, and it was getting dark out. The restaurant was pretty quiet with only a few customers here and there. 2 men walked in the door and looked around. They both grabbed sodas and then sat down at a table right next to mine. I remember thinking it was strange because there were plenty of other open tables. I minded my own business and continued doing my homework, looking up every few minutes to make sure Callie was okay on the playground. I could see her clearly from where I was sitting. Suddenly, one of the men sat down at my table. It startled me, making me gasp out loud. The man apologized for scaring me and then told me the reason he had come over was that he thought he knew my dad. I explained to him that I hadn't seen my dad in years and that he wasn't even in the state. This didn't seem to faze the man as he went on to ask me questions about school, sports, and what I did for fun. I was so confused about why he was asking me this and why he even cared. He then noticed a cross necklace I was wearing and began asking me questions about my religion and where I went to church. Several minutes had gone by and I realized I hadn't checked on Callie. The man was blocking my vision of the play area. I craned my neck to look past him and I couldn't see her anywhere. Was she hiding in the tube slide? Had she come back in the dining area when I wasn't watching? I began to go into panic mode. The man was still asking me questions, but I stood up and told him that I needed to find my sister. I sprinted to the play area, scanning the area for Callie, who was nowhere in sight. I then glanced out the window into the parking lot just in time to see the man who had come in with the guy who had sat down at my table. He was carrying Callie, kicking and screaming, into a nearby truck. I screamed for my cousin to call 911 and told him that Callie was being kidnapped. My cousin is a big guy who was in his 20s at the time. He told his coworker to call 911 and he ran out into the parking lot with me, followed by 2 of his other male coworkers. By this point, the man was struggling to get Callie into the vehicle. When he saw my cousin and his coworkers coming towards him, he panicked and left my sister on the parking lot ground before jumping in his vehicle and driving off. Luckily, my cousin was able to get a picture of the license plate. The police were able to locate him, but not the man he had come in with that was trying to distract me at the time, so I wouldn't see what was going on. I can't believe how close I came to probably never seeing my little sister again. When I was in high school, I worked at the local McDonald's to make some extra money and save up for college. I usually would start my shift at around 3:30 p.m. and would finish up around 9 p.m. As much as McDonald's gets a bad rep, it really wasn't a bad job. I worked with other kids my age, and we all made the best of it. On one particular day, it was about an hour until the end of my shift, and I was anxious to go home. It had been a long day, and I had a pile of homework waiting for me. The restaurant was pretty empty, and I was sweeping the floor when a disheveled-looking older man walked in. I sat my broom